Yeah, we've got a situation here where my opponent played a collected company.
I'm gonna pretend I didn't just make that mistake.
Yeah, no, it was actually in his graveyard. I saw it. It must have so he played a collected company, and he put those 2 creatures into play, and then he put their stuff on the bottom with the Coco.
And then I went to resolve my Nettle Sentinel trigger.
Yeah.
I actually don't know Nettle Sentinel. Whenever you play a green style, you may untap Nettle Sentinel.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the question is,
So he didn't say anything at all about untapping it until after he had already done all the steps for the collected company and put it in his graveyard, put those creatures out, and put the cards from the Coco on the bottom of his line. So I think that he missed his trigger.
I don't know. I think that because the trigger, I've been resolving it that way, I guess all day, but I didn't think I needed to say anything.
So since it doesn't change the resolution of the spell at all, and I think about it.
No, it does not have anything related to.
I was checking for anything that he could have gotten extra mana from tapping it again or something from actually one of the guys he just got.
Yeah, this is one of the ones that I do have.
Card.
Since him untapping it before or after is not going to change the resolution of the spell at all, and he did do it before any other game actions were attemptedly taken, we're just going to call that out of order sequencing, untap that as normal since he did acknowledge it as part of Coco resolving still, and go on with the game with that untapped.
All right, so to make sure I'm understanding, the ruling you're issuing is we're going to untap the Nettle Sentinel and proceed no infractions. Is that correct? Okay. All right, so now that we've issued the ruling, we can talk about the ruling. Yep. So how confident would you say that the thing you just said is based on policy support?
Actually trying to look at out of order sequencing right now.
All right, so that would be the MTR, I believe 4.3.
That's fine. In the IPG.
Yeah, MTR is where out of order sequencing is covered.
And I'm gonna go with about 50%.
Okay, so we're putting 50% confidence. Now let me ask you a question. If you were a player at a Magic tournament and the judge gave you a ruling they were 50% confident was correct, would you be satisfied with that?
No, and I should have probably mentioned.
If I may butt in for just a moment.
I should have mentioned.
Never tell the player you're only 50%.
Obviously, we're not doing that. This is like a role playing.
Because I know my own limitations, I probably should have mentioned the fact that appeals are a thing post ruling.
That's possible. Asking another judge for a second opinion would be a good
Right. I was going to say I would
it.
never proactively offer the appeal just because you want a player to feel confident in your ruling right away.
And you want to be confident.
I feel like if he had basically tried to dispute it but not say I want to appeal to the judge, I had judged specifically, that would have been a good time to mention.
Exactly. As if he feels uncomfortable, by all means you can say, you're always welcome to an appeal. But if you give your ruling and then say you're welcome to appeal this right away, it doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence. It's like it feels like you're not confident. So
yeah. So okay, that's one important thing is to have a framework for what you do. And if you're in a situation where you don't know 100% what the right ruling would be, that should be part of your framework because that's a thing that can happen, right? So. We talked about a couple of things that would be good practice to do. Obviously, this is like an educational kind of experience, so there might not be all the same kind of avenues that you might have in a normal experience. But okay, now let's talk about the actual ruling.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the correct ruling in this case? First of all, can you tell me at what point the Nettle Sentinel's triggered ability should have untapped the Nettle Sentinel? If everybody was playing 100% right. Moto according to how the Magic rules are.
It would have been before he even looked for started to resolve Coco.
Okay, that is an accurate statement. The correct time would have been before looking at the top 6 with Coco. All right, so given that the player did not do that, what type of would it be a fair statement to say that the triggered ability of Nettle Sentinel was not addressed at the appropriate time?
I know there are exceptions to that for things that are not.
You've got like a thing, you can look it up.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, it's not going to tell me the exact answer, but very close edge case. Since it is a May, but since it does not require a target, it does not change anything except the tap or untap state of that guy.
So would you say that is a visible or non-visible change in the game state?
It is visible since it's untapping, which would
Right.
put that at
That is
risk.
correct.
Yeah, it's not like prowess where until we interact with its toughness or power, it doesn't matter.
And I will before we go too down talking about mistrigger, I do want to address the out of order sequencing.
Yep.
So it's acceptable for players to take a block of actions that, while technically in an incorrect order, arrive at a legal and clearly understood game state once they're complete. So it would be, okay. I'm putting some air quotes on there.
I think the out of order sequencing would have it said collected company Nettle Sentinel, but I don't untap it. Do collected company, put it into play, and untap Nettle
Fair
Sentinel.
enough.
Yeah.
All right.
In that situation, yes, I did things out of order, but it arrived at the correct game state, and I mentioned it all in the right way.
Yeah. So philosophically, this, in my opinion, does not fit very well with out of order sequencing. Given that if I'm thinking out of order sequencing, I'm thinking there should be a block of actions, and the player knows what all the actions in the block are supposed to be going in.
It's like a player casting a Llanowar Elves and cracking a fetch at the same time.
Yeah, or a player plays a spell that destroys or sacrifices a creature, and then they put the creature in, and then they put the spell in, or something like that. So the criteria I like to think about is the player should have probably knew about all the actions that they were taking in that block ahead of time, instead of knowing about some of the actions and then thinking of some of the actions later on, and trying to put those in after the fact, which in fact the out of order sequencing specifically says they're not supposed to be doing.
Yeah. So even though we end up in the same game state, if he says it exists, and then untaps it later.
Well, that would
he didn't
be
say it existed at the right time.
correct.
We're saying it was missed.
Because mistrigger specifically says that the player has to demonstrate awareness of the trigger. It does not say they have to do the appropriate game action of the trigger.
Which would have been collected company trigger, resolve collected company untap.
Yeah.
I've demonstrated awareness of the trigger.
Yeah, that would have been okay. But yeah, based on the facts of this case as they were presented to you, I'd have ruled that this was a mistrigger. And because this is a beneficial trigger to untap the Nettle Sentinel, there would not be a penalty associated with that. So you got the no penalty situation correct. But I also would say that given that it's a mistrigger, the opponent would be the one to say whether it got untapped or not.
I was going to say, do you know the difference between the fix for a missed beneficial trigger and a missed detrimental trigger?
Detrimental trigger.
And specifically of how you fix it, not the penalty.
Yeah. Either for the beneficial one, I believe opponent gets to choose if it gets put on the stack right now at all or just never. And then for detrimental, the opponent still gets to choose something, but it's whether it's put on immediately or at the start of the next phase.
So it's actually it's actually a lot simpler than that.
Is it?
Yeah. The quality of whether the triggered ability is generally considered detrimental or generally considered not detrimental only matters for whether you are giving a warning or not.
Oh, so it is just the same fix.
Yes.
Oh,
It was
Yeah,
a little
the
bit
fix
of a
is
trick.
exactly the same. The only thing that the detrimental or not changes would be whether the player gets a warning.
Right.
And that
Okay.
makes sense, obviously that it would affect that, because I'm not going to give you a warning because you forgot to untap your Nettle Sentinel, right?
Right,
That's
it's
just the judge
obviously-
being on a power trip or something.
Right, it's obviously I wanted
Yeah,
to do
it's
that.
obviously not I'm not cheating if I forgot to untap my Nettle Sentinel. I'd be cheating if I forgot to tap a creature but like forgetting to untap a creature, you're probably not dealing with someone. So that's that. And you're correct in identifying that there are certain triggered abilities that are handled the way that you mentioned, but those are based on what kind of triggered ability it is, like what sort of stuff the triggered ability does, not based on whether it's detrimental.
Beneficial or detrimental.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, not specifically based on that criteria.
Got it.
So that's good.
Let me look that up.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but we definitely are not taking into account the fact that this card exists at all, right?
Correct.
Because, like, basically, for this specific scenario, the fact that he has a thing that, like, whether or not this is tapped or not could change how much mana he can produce, basically, after that comes into play.
Right, yeah.
Like, that is irrelevant to the ruling.
Yeah.
Just the fact that that card exists.
It might be relevant, like if stuff that exists in the game state or like in the player's deck might be relevant for if the player was cheating or not.
Yeah.
But it's not relevant for like once you establish that they are not cheating.
Yeah.
It'd be like if we're trying to determine how many untaps have happened this turn or something like that. Like if he thinks that I've untapped this too many times, then we might be talking about this. Like if it's tap untap in response to spells, and we're trying to determine how much mana was made versus should. If you're thinking there's maybe cheating going on,
That was
then it definitely matters.
kind of one of the reasons I checked for that card on the field real quick, but it didn't seem like it was going to be relevant. But thought it would be good to know if it was already out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good
right,
job. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, don't think so.
All right, great.